right, Easy Yoke Endurance Podcast. We're back for a weekly episode or weekly update episode. Going to talk a little bit about run exercising. That was some of one of the things that I added this week was trying to get my run exercise in. And if you're here for the first time, I'm training for a couple of endurance events this year. The first one is a marathon distance 26.2 mile rucking event called the Baton Memorial Death March in southern New Mexico. And I'm also going to then train for a full distance Ironman in November. Very ambitious goals, and so I've got a lot of training to pack in. But the first thing up is the ruck. So the ruck is where the focus is at, but I'm also working on cycling and running. I have not started swimming yet. The running did not go so great, and I'll go over the run workout and what I kind of settled on as acceptable, or really just what I could bang out. So for the ruck, though, I went to the Petroglyphs National Monument here locally so that I could get some of that mixed terrain, loose gravel, some elevation change, and things that would challenge my rucking pace to see if I could still ruck at the pace that would put me under the 12-hour event cutoff. So let's look at it here. So I was supposed to do 10 miles. I ended up doing 9.96 miles. I ran out of time. I only had 3 hours, and I used 2 hours and 55 minutes and 47 seconds, and I had somewhere to be. So that's why that ended around that time and why I just cut it short. Not really I didn't really realize I was cutting it short. I thought I was going to hit 10 miles, but the GPS says I only hit 9 miles, 0.96. So we'll just call it 10. But the good news about this ruck, if I'm looking here on my Garmin Connect data, it looks like I had roughly 1,100 feet of elevation change, which is good. Looking back at the Baton elevation change chart, I think there's actually much more than that in that ruck. I think it's going to be more closer to 15 to 1,600 feet of elevation change. I was looking at that chart in the last podcast in feet, but it was in meters. So multiply that by 3. So I had about 400 feet. So I think it's going to be about 15, 1,600, somewhere in there. But this was 10 miles and I had 1,100 feet. So I think that's comparable to what I'll experience at the actual event. However, this elevation change happened there and back, meaning I went up, then down, then up, then down. And I don't believe that's the way that the Baton goes. I think it is just up, 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 down, down, down. So I'll have to take that into account, because the longer you go up, it definitely does suck your pace out. And the longer you go down, it definitely can increase your pace. So let us look at this pace here over the course of it and see what I came out with for the full 10 miles. And looks like my total pace or speed was 3.4 miles per hour, which is great. The goal is 3.3 miles per hour. So 3.4 miles per hour for a 10-mile distance with elevation change of 1,171 feet in ascent is great. And that's what we're looking for, is to be able to maintain that speed. And that was the average speed. It's I was running or jogging the downhills, and I was, just rucking and walking the uphills and the flats. So that puts us at a 17.39 mile pace, 3.4 miles per hour, which is, again, excellent. That'll put me close to the 9 hour mark if I can hold that kind of pace on the actual event. So I'm very pleased with this last long ruck. I did not have any major foot issues on the ruck. I did feel some hot spots start to develop, but again, wearing the 2 socks, the sock liner and the wicking sock liner and the outer wool Darn Tough sock, worked out great. Really laced the boots up tight and made sure they were on. I did have some swelling from the length of the event. And if you watch my YouTube short, you'll see that it was a kind of an interesting environment because the sun was so strong that I was just really and I'm rucking. I was sweating and sweating and sweating, but the air was so cold that it froze and my whole beard was just full of ice. It was kind of comical. Anyhow, so that was the ruck, and that was a great deal. But let's cut over to my run that I had later on in the week and see kind of the bad news for me. And where is the run? Here it is. All right, so the run looks like I did 4.45 miles and over the course of an hour. So actually, I just went out to do an hour. The distance is just what was accomplished in that hour. Now, that puts me at a pace of 13 minutes and 40 seconds per mile. And that is what... So it's just kind of funny to me because that's a terrible running pace. But the truth is, it's because I wasn't really running that much. So I just went out with the intention of just running and setting a baseline and seeing how far I could run. And that was about 3 minutes. 3 minutes was about all I could run. And when I was running, I was doing about 8 minute and 10 second pace when I was doing run. But when I was not running, I was just walking, and that sucks all the rest of the pace out. But so I started off, ran. Did about 3 minutes, and then I was like, okay, well, obviously I can't maintain a run, which I don't fully understand because I can ride the bike for hours and at a pretty hardcore pace, which I'll get into some of the Zwift activities I had this week that were awesome, or I felt awesome about them. But running is just terrible. It sucks. So when I went for the run, about 3 minutes, then I did a 1-2, which means I ran for 1 minute and then walked for 2 minutes. And then I realized, well, that's not really going to cut it. I need to try to get as much running out of this as I can. So then I went to a 3-3, and then ultimately I settled on finishing the workout, doing 3 minutes of running, 2 minutes of walking, 3 minutes of running, 2 minutes of walking, 3 minutes of running, 2 minutes of walking, all the way till the hour mark. And so all that hour ended up at a distance of 4.45 miles with interval of running and walking. And that is just something I'm going to have to work a lot harder on, because getting up to a marathon distance, and especially a marathon distance at the end of the Ironman, I'm going to need to have a much stronger running base than what I've got right now, because that's just terrible. I can't really chalk it up to a bad day, because I'm going to need to be able to run a marathon on the worst day of my life. And so I really got to work on the running. There's not a whole lot more to that. I'll try to come up with a run training plan based off of my ability now, and just kind of keep adapting that. And don't get too worried if you're like, wow, if this guy can't run for 3 minutes and he thinks he's going to finish a marathon in November at the end of an Ironman, full distance Ironman, it's not that big of a deal. Once I get into the rhythm, and once I'll have this like exponential increase in ability. It's just the way it's going to work out. So I'm not pumped about this data. I was hoping I could, run a couple of miles. And I was really kind of hoping I could run a couple of miles because I'm rucking fine. And on the indoor cycle, I'm putting out hours and hours and hours. And I was thinking, no, that'll probably translate to some kind of endurance on my feet. But running just hits me differently. Maybe it's just because, heavy set guy, it just has a bigger impact overall. But so there was the ruck, there's the run. let's go look at Zwift and see some of the last couple of exercises I did. So looks like let's just look at a couple of the rides and see how they went. Some of them went really well as far as my power data and my pace. And something interesting. So let's look at this ride here. So I had a group ride, stage 3 group ride, Tour de Zwift. And if you know about Zwift, they have these different little events. And so this was a Tour de Zwift, stage 3. I've already done the stage 1 and stage 2. But if I look at the stage 3 ride, and they have an A, B, and C ride. The A ride is the long distance ride, the B is the medium distance, and the C is the short distance. And they have a D, which is a ladies ride. Anyhow, meaning you can't ride that ride if you're not a lady. And it is I don't know what the distance is because I've never even looked at it. But anyways, the long distance ride for the A group stage 3 was 25.2 miles. And of course, this is all just video game simulated distance on the indoor trainer. That ride took me 1 hour and 11 minutes. And so looking at my data, I had a max watt output of 486 watts. So probably on some kind of incline or climb, my power data, because of the resistance increases when you hit a climb, went up to 486 watts. But my average wattage was 267 watts. And you rate your power by watts per kilo, and that's not necessarily an excellent watt per kilo for me at 227-ish pounds. And whatever, convert that to kilos on your own. But essentially, that's probably like 2.1, it doesn't actually show it right here, but probably somewhere in the 2 point something kilos, watts per kilo. But what's encouraging is I am not losing average watts per kilo, or I'm not losing average watts as I keep working out. I'm not going down. I'm kind of staying steady and even kind of going up in my watts per kilo, not watts per kilo. Well, my watts per kilo is going up because as my kilos go down and my watts don't go down, then that inevitably means that my watts per kilo is going up. So my efficiency is going up, which will translate to real world speed. And that is what we're looking for. I am aiming for the full Ironman distance to hold 250 watts. And I'm hoping and planning to be at about 85 kilograms. And that will put me, I'll be moving pretty quickly if that is the case. I can't guarantee that's going to be the case, but that's kind of based on the data I have now. That's what I'm hoping I can put out is 250 watts, the whole 112 mile ride on the Ironman, and that I'm at around 85 kilograms. So I think that's like 195, somewhere in there is where I hope to be for the actual event, mainly because I want to move quickly. So looking at that, good ride, 267 watts for an hour and 11 minutes. Excellent. Obviously still some growth there. But I was just thinking about when I was on that ride and this next ride that I'm going to look at, the whole time I'm just thinking about my podcast. I'm just thinking about like, oh man, someone is going to go look at my Zwift data because I've invited everybody to go look at my Easy Yoke Zwift data, and they're going to be like, oh, let's see what kind of watts this guy can hold, or see. And it's causing me to work out harder, which is not necessarily how you should train for endurance events. A lot of times you should be training easier and for longer periods of time. So I'm just going to take these last couple of rides where I really put down some serious wattage, and I'm going to have to dial that back in the rest of this week's rides and just ride in my zone 2, which is at a much lower wattage, more like 200 watts is more where I can stay in zone 2, not 270 and not 200 or not as much as this. So I went ahead and did a race, which they have the flat is fast race. And the thing about flat racing in Zwift is that the Zwift algorithm is taking into account your weight, and you input your weight. So it's kind of on an honor systems here, and I weigh myself and I put my real weight in here. So it calculates your weight or your watts per kilo, and then their gaming algorithm decides how that's going to affect you when you're climbing and descending. So on a descent, that's a good thing to be heavy. On a climb, it's a very negative thing to be heavy. And a lot of heavyset people have criticized Zwift for being not so kind to those of us who carry some extra weight, meaning that they think that the algorithm is biased against your weight. However, I don't really know if it is or isn't, but it definitely, you can put out a lot of power and hit a climb and just watch all the small people fly up the hill. And that's just the way it is. So when it comes to racing, I don't want to go race a hill climb because I'm not going to be effective at a hill climb race. I need to be in a flat race. So fortunately, they're having this flat is fast race series. And I decided, hey, why not? Let me go get in on a race. A little background story on why I don't do a whole lot of Zwift races. I am a category B. And if you know Zwift, there's only one more category above category B, and that's category A. So basically category B is, it's up there in your FTP. It's based off your FTP data. And my initial FTP data was not based off, I did not have a smart trainer when I did my initial FTP data. All I had was a speed sensor and a heart rate sensor and a cadence sensor. And it used a calculation called Zwift power to determine how much power you were producing based off of those data points. And so my first FTP test, I think it was like my FTP was 346 watts, and that's a 20 minute max power output. And they give you this functional threshold power, which is supposed to be the power you can hold for an entire hour. So Zwift, the algorithm with my speed sensor and my cadence sensor and my heart rate sensor decided that I was producing 346 watts FTP, which is ridiculous. I was not producing that much. When I switched over to a wheel-on smart trainer that has variable resistance and has actual power data coming out of and could calibrate it and all that. When I switched over to that, my my FTP dropped to like 211 for the first FTP test after I got on that trainer. So now I've been on that trainer for a while, and my FTP is somewhere up, I think around 314 watts. So no matter what, I'm still considered a category B because of that initial FTP test. Basically, I think Zwift just sees all of my rides as sandbagging, and they don't believe me that I'm not, that I don't have an FTP of 346 watts. So I don't go into a lot of races because it's race restricted. I can't race in a C category. I have to race in B category, which means that everyone in the B category is 3.2 to 5 watts per kilo. So 3.2 to 5 watts per kilo, maybe it's 4 watts per kilo. Yeah, maybe it's 3.2 to 4 watts per kilo is what you're rated rank B, and anything over 4 watts puts you in A. And then they might have a category for professionals. I'm not sure. I know that professionals are annotated as known professionals on Zwift, but I don't know if they're restricted from racing or not in any of those categories. However, once you get to a category C, you can only race category C and up. Once you get to a category B, you can only race category B and up. but category B is a stretch for me. So anyways, this was a flat race. So I decided, hey, why not go see how I'm going to hold up in an actual Zwift race. And so looking at this race, it was a 16.1 mile race. I finished in 40 minutes and 35 seconds. That doesn't make complete sense. But let's look at the data here. So my max watts during a race was 434 watts, which means I did not do a very strong sprint finish. Usually you try to have a little bit left in the tank and do a sprint finish, but apparently I did not have anything left for the sprint finish. I got a 434 max watts. But the good news on this Zwift ride, and I'm really thinking, like I'm saying, I think it's just the podcast. The podcast, every single listener on my back, and I'm just thinking like, hey, they're pushing me through this. I can't let people see a bad race, which I'm not saying this was a great race, but I was definitely happier with the result of this race than I've been with any race that I tried in the past, which has been a while since I've tried one. But I hit an average watts for the whole entire race, 303 watts, which I don't care what you say, that's putting some power to the pedals. And if I can keep that kind of power and lose the weight, another, 30 pounds, then that's going to be some serious speed in the future. But right now, that put me in 20th place during that race. And if you look at my heart rate data, we haven't really gone into talking much about zones, but man, I'm up there in zone 4 and zone 5. I'm riding at 168 to 170 beats per minute, all the way up at 172. So I spent a whole lot of time between 160. The majority of the ride was between 162 and 172. And so 162, 164 for 6 minutes, 164 to 166 for 6 minutes, 166 to 168 for another 7, 5, 10, whatever. It basically, for the majority of the ride, for about 20, 30 minutes of the ride, I was up there in zone 4, zone 5, and that is not sustainable for long periods of time, but I came out with an average heart rate of 161 beats per minute, which is a little high for me. Like I said, my functional threshold should be around 140, and so I was throwing down 161. So some serious beats per minute there, and that means I'm just burning up carbohydrate energy. Can't do any of that kind of stuff on an actual endurance event, but on a short Zwift race, hey man, throw it down. So super pumped about that 20th place finish, and I fell into 20th. I actually went out hot, and I was probably leading that race for about a quarter of the ride. And then about a quarter of the way in, I started to lose power, and other people started to pick it up. So I got dropped before the end of the first. It was a 2-lap race. I got dropped right before the end of the first lap from the major peloton. And then I held that position for the rest of the race. So no one came up and got me after I got dropped, but I was not able to get back on. And I finished, I think, over 2 minutes back from the lead. And the major peloton was only seconds behind the lead. So it was probably a sprint finish at the end of that race. And I was nowhere near holding on. I kind of look back and think that maybe, just maybe, I could have held on to that peloton a little bit longer. But this was supposed to be a flat race, and there were some hills that were like 6% grade, and they are right at the end of the course. So that's where you would be finishing the race, and that was also the midway point on the first lap. And I definitely got dropped on that hill, and I just could not get back on. And I wanted to maintain a really good pace and a really good speed, so I didn't want to just completely blow up and then just fall back And so I was satisfied holding my position at 20 for the majority of the race. After that, first lap, like I said, I got dropped from the peloton at the midway point and then lost 2 minutes. But excellent fun. And I was just thinking, yeah, man, everyone who listens is this is one of the whole points of having a podcast, is sharing like what you're doing, and then you put it out there. I'm saying to you, I'm running an Ironman, I'm doing this rucking event, and I'm doing all this training, and you can hold me accountable because you can go look and see, because I've told you all the places where you can go see if I'm telling you exactly if I'm saying what I'm doing or doing what I'm saying, and it's all here for you to see. So I was like, I gotta get these pedals moving faster. Don't want to be people to think I'm, not putting in effort. But back to my prior point, I am putting down some major time and major speed in the Zwift, but excuse me, I'm putting down some major time and speed in Zwift and putting down some miles on rucks. But for some reason, it just is not translating to my run game. And what's funny about that is, I haven't cycled since I was a child. I cycled a little bit with my dad when I was a child, and we did some long rides. It was cool. And it was road bike or tour bike style riding. But that was, we're talking about 13, 14, 15 years old. That was a long time ago. I'm 40 years old now. Marathon running, I did marathon running before, mostly half distance, but that's been like 7 or more years since I've run in any kind of run event, and I have not been running since. But I thought that it was going to be more like riding a bike, right? I thought running was going to be more like riding a bike. Well, it turns out riding a bike is more like riding a bike than running is like riding a bike. So there's that. And as far as the rucking goes, I guess I can just get that real slow pace is something I can do. But when it comes to running, man, my heart rate just spikes up real quick when I go running. And I need to, I guess, just do more run workouts until I can rein that in to an acceptable level. But hey, guys, again, this is just a weekly update episode. Got more coming, more information coming. We'll have some other, more focused episodes, but this one's just going to be a weekly update on what's going on and some of the data that I pulled from the exercises and workouts that I did this last week. And hey, if I can do it, you can do it. And the only thing that's required for you to finish your endurance event is to keep moving and don't stop.